Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We'll be learning today Mi'at Hashem Daf Samach Aleph Amid Beis and a piece of Daf Samach Beis Amid Aleph. We're continuing to learn Hilchos Rosh Hashanah and we have been learning Hilchos Shofar. We start off today on Samach Aleph Amid Beis with a brand new Siman Tuf Kuf Pei Zayin Din HaTorah L'Say Chabar, the halacha of one who blows the shofar into a pit, into some sort of a depression in the earth where it will create an echo. Ubay Gimel Seifim, and here we have 3 Seifim. Says the Mechaber in Sif Aleph, HaTorah b'say chabar, if somebody blows shofar into a pit, ay b'say chama'ara. Well, it's not that he blows into a pit, I'm sorry, that I misspoke. HaTorah b'say chabar, if somebody blows shofar inside a bar. When I said if he blows into a bar, the implication is he was standing outside and he blew into the bar. We're talking here, HaTorah b'say chabar, somebody who's inside a bar and he blows the shofar, ay b'say chama'ara, or if he's blowing shofar inside a cave. Now this is taken directly from a Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah on Daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis, and you might be wondering, why would we have a Mishnah about somebody who blows shofar while he's standing in a pit or in a cave? Sounds quite strange. So let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Aleph. B'say chabar. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Hu Dina de Mishnah. This is a halacha that's taken straight out of the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah. The Kasvar Rishayim, and the Rishayim write, She Mishnah zu l'tzarech nishna. This Mishnah was not just written as happenstance. This Mishnah was written to address a particular need. B'shas hagzera, at the time that there were terrible decrees against Yidden, shegazru ha'umayis shalo yikaimu Yisrael as hamitzvahs, when the nations of the world passed decrees to try and prevent Yidden from being mekayim mitzvahs, v'nischabu b'bayros uv'ma'aros lekayim, they hid in pits and they hid in caves in order to be able to go and be mekayim the mitzvah of shofar. So we're addressing here a particular need, unfortunately. There were times when Yidden could not go into shul and blow shofar, not just because of a pandemic or a quarantine, but because it was pikuach nefashos. If they would have blown shofar and the non-Jewish populations would have heard it, chas v'chalila, they could have gone and killed people. So what did the Yidden do? The Yidden have tremendous chavivas for mitzvahs. They want to know that they could be mekayim the mitzvah. So they went down into a pit or they went into a cave and they blew shofar there. So now let's go back to the Mechaber. HaTorah b'say chabar or b'say chama'ara. If somebody blows shofar while in a pit or while in a cave, oisam ha'imdim b'say chabar v'hama'ara, those who are standing in the pit or in the cave together with the Baal Torah, yotzu, they are yotzu the mitzvah of shofar. However, v'ha'imdim b'chutz, those who are standing outside the pit or outside the cave, then the Mechaber says it depends. Im kol shofar shamu, if they hear the sound of the shofar. Now a direct translation of the Mechaber would be, if they hear the sound of the shofar, then yotzu, then they are yotza. However, from the Mishnah Berurah, and he takes it from the Rishonim, from Rashi in Rosh Hashanah and Chav Ches Amud Beis, it's clear that that's not really what it means. Im kol shofar shamu, if they hear the sound of the shofar alone. So that means that they very clearly hear the sound of the shofar, and there's no other sound mixed in together with the sound of the shofar, then yotzu, then they are yotza. However, v'im kol havara shamu, but if they hear the sound of the echo mixed in together with the sound of the shofar, lo yotzu, then they are not yotza the mitzvah of shofar. Why not? It seems that the reason they're not yotza, and the truth is that what I'm going to say is based a little bit on a machlokes achronim. So what I'm saying is going according to one shita, but it seems to be the most prevalent. If they hear the sound of an echo mixed in together with the sound of the shofar, then they're not only hearing kol shofar, they're hearing kol shofar v'davar acher. They're hearing the sound of the shofar mixed in together with another sound. And that is puzzle, because you need to hear the sound of the shofar, not the sound of the shofar and something else. And this might be similar to a halacha that we learned earlier. We learned that there could be a problem sometimes. Let's say you go ahead and you have a shofar that was punctured, and you go and you fill it with a foreign material, and then you blow shofar. It could be puzzle because you're hearing kol shofar v'davar acher. It's not only the sound of the shofar that you're hearing a sound generated by the shofar and by some other foreign material. Now, you're still hearing the kol shofar, but it's not the kol shofar alone that you're hearing. In order to be yotze shofar, you have to hear kol shofar. The Levush, I believe it is, brings down that the makara for this, the source for this halacha, is the pasuk says, "V'ha'avarta shofar." You should cause to pass through the land a ha'avara, a announcement of a shofar. It has to be a kol hachraza. It has to be a voice of an announcement that comes only from a shofar, not from anything else. And therefore, if there's a kol havara mixed in together with the kol shofar, you are not yotze. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah here. Let's go to Mishnah Berurah's cotton base. Oy b'soich ha'ma'ora. The Mechaber spoke about somebody who's standing in a pit or standing in a cave. Says the Chavetz Chaim, doesn't have to be only a pit or a cave. For hu adin martef. The same halacha would apply to a cellar. If you have an underground cellar and you're standing in an underground cellar and you blow shofar, that is akin to blowing shofar inside a pit. The point is that you're down in a chamber underneath the ground. Ukahai gavna, or anything similar. Makaim shehu tachas hakarka. It's an area that is underground. And the problem is, shekayel hatikia misarev im kayel havara. The sound of the tekiah that emanates from the shofar is going to be mixed together with the sound of the havara, which I'm using the English word echo. La'imdim bachutz. Those who are standing outside, we are concerned that when they hear the sounds that are coming out from this underground area, they're not only hearing the sound of the shofar, they're hearing the sound of the shofar mixed together with the kol havara, mixed together with the echo. Now, what's apparent from here, is that this concern is only for those who are standing outside. There is no concern, according to what we've seen so far, for those who are standing inside. Somebody who's in the pit, in the cave, or in the cellar, we're not concerned that he's going to be hearing two kolos, the kol of the shofar and the kol of the echo. I'm not 100% sure why it would be that way, and indeed, there are shittas that say, let me see if it's brought down here. Yeah, as a matter of fact, if you take a look at the Shar HaTzion, you know what, we'll wait until we get to Ois Katan Gimel. Let's wait for this discussion until we get to Ois Katan Gimel, until the next Ois Katan in the Mishnah Berurah. Continues the Chavetz Chaim, Ubebinyan sherubai al hakarka. Let's say you have a structure which is mostly above ground, umiktsasai b'soich hakarka. However, part of this structure goes underground. So we have a house that has an underground basement. And maybe the basement even itself, very often you have a basement where part of the basement is below grade and part of the basement is above grade. That would be okay. Because since the majority of the structure is above ground, the sound of the shofar and the sound of the echo do not become mixed. V'nishma kol shofar, and the sound of the shofar alone will be heard. Af la'imdim mibachutz, even for the people who are standing outside. V'ayin bir halacha mashe kasavdu bazeh, and he sends us the Chavetz Chaim to a lengthy bir halacha here, bir halacha divrei hamaschil oy b'soich ha'ma'ora, where he goes through this and he tries to understand exactly what is the problem over here. Now, it seems to me that the problem we're concerned with is that when you blow shofar in a pit, when you blow shofar in a cave, or when you blow shofar in some kind of structure that's underground, right away there's a very heavy echo. Now, for the people that are standing inside the room, the feeling that I'm getting from taking a look at the Rishonim and the Achrayim is that the shofar blast, the sound of the shofar itself, will overpower any sound of an echo or anything else. And therefore, the people that are standing inside, we're comfortable that they are going to hear the shofar blast very clearly on its own. However, the people that are standing outside, they don't get the powerful blast of the shofar. They're only hearing what comes outside. Now, what's going to come outside is a sound of the shofar and a sound of the echo mixed. And that's a problem because you're getting two kolos. Let's see Mishnah Berurah's cut in Gimel. The people who are standing inside are not a problem. The besoich bar gufa, because inside the bar itself, einoi nishma koil havara. You do not hear the sound of the echo. Now let's take a look at the Sharatzia and Ois Cotton Gimel. He brings down here Milashon Rashi, from the Lashon of Rashi in Rosh Hashanah, Chav Zayin Amud Beis, mashma, the implication is, Tisham la'olam nishma koil shofar. The Rashi, let me see, I think I have the Rashi over here. Chav Zayin Amud Beis, Rashi says, Oisana oimdim bibar yotzu. Those who are standing inside the bar are yotza. Says Rashi, Shehein koil hashofar la'olam shamu. Because they will always hear the sound of the shofar. And I think pshat is that when you're standing inside together with the Baal Tekeah, the blast of the shofar itself very clearly overpowers anything else. So you're going to hear the koil of the shofar. And let's go back to the Sharet Zion here. So Malashon Rashi mashma desham la'olam nishma koil shofar. And what the Chavetz Chaim is trying to point out to you is that according to Rashi, go back to the Mishnah Berurah, the besarich bar kufa einoi nishma koil havara. What the Chavetz Chaim is taking from that Rashi is that the people who are standing inside the bar never have to clear a shaila. They never have to worry, did we hear a koil havara? Did we hear the koil shofar? No. The people who are standing inside, according to Rashi, they hear the koil shofar. There's no problem. However, says the Chavetz Chaim, Achein milashon haritva. However, from the ritva mavur, it comes out the minastam nishma sham koil shofar. That minastam, the default is that we would assume that somebody standing inside with the Baal Tekeah is going to hear the koil shofar and he's going to hear it alone very clearly. Ubenira loy the koil havara shama. But if a person standing inside says to himself, whoa, this room is a real echo chamber, and I feel like I'm hearing a koil havara, bevadai lo yatsa, that he wouldn't be yatsa. Ayin sham. Okay. So let's go back to Mishnah Berurah's cut in Gimel. Oisana oimdim besoich, the besoich habar gufa einoi nishma koil havara. Inside the bar with the Baal Tekeah, you don't have to worry that you heard a koil havara. V'lav dafka im kol gufam babar, and this doesn't mean that the people who are listening to the shofar, their entire bodies have to be inside the bar. Ela afilu ichnisu rak roisham labar, even if they just stuck their heads and their ears into the bar so that they're hearing inside the bar, sagi, that would be enough for them to be yotza. Ois cotton dalid, but v'ha'imdim mi bachutz, but those people who are standing outside, if somebody is standing inside the bar, but his head and his ears are outside the bar, they would be considered like somebody who's standing outside the pit, because their ears, they're listening outside the pit. Those who are outside, if they heard the koil shofar, then they're yotza. If they did not hear, if they heard the koil havara, if they heard the koil shofar mixed with the koil havara, then they're not yotza. If they heard the koil shofar, they are yotza. points out the Chavetz Chaim, v'hu sheyiskaven hatekeah lo yitziam. Clearly, the one who's blowing the shofar, the Baal Tekeah, had to have in mind to be mitzi those people. What the Chavetz Chaim is pointing out is, wait a second, we're talking about a situation here where there are people inside with the Baal Tekeah and there are people outside. We have to make sure that the Baal Tekeah had in mind to be mitzi even the people that are outside. Or we're talking about a shliach tzibur. The shliach tzibur doesn't have to have in mind clearly, I want to be yotze everybody. The default das, you're a shliach tzibur, that's your job. Your job is to be mitzi anybody who hears you. If the people standing outside heard the echo, pirush, it doesn't mean that they only heard the echo. Pirush, she'im koil ha-shofar, that together with the koil ha-shofar, libisayf, at the end, koil havara, they also heard the koil of the echo, la yotzu, they're not yotza. Why? Shaharei koil pasol, ma'uriv im koil ha-shofar, because now you're hearing two separate koilos. You're hearing one koil, which is the koil of the shofar, and you're also hearing the koil havara. The koil havara is not the koil shofar. The koil havara is an echo that's being generated from the walls of the pit, from the walls of the cave. If you hear that, you're not yotza, even though you heard the koil shofar in the beginning alone, because it takes a moment for the echo to bounce back and to hear the echo, but it doesn't matter. That's why the Mishnah Berurah says lebasayf. Lebasayf, at the end, you're going to hear two kailos. You're going to hear the koil shofar and the koil havara, and therefore you are not yotza. Now we go to an interesting Mishnah Berurah here. Mishnah Berurah is cut in Zion. Lo yotza. V'kasva paiskim, the paiskim right. The sibas davar zeh, the underlying problem over here, talui ba'omek habar, is going to depend on the depth of the pit, oi berichok hamokoim, or the distance that you are away from the Baal Tekeah. V'chalodam yesh b'yadai lahavchin u'lahakir kol shofar shama b'lechud, oi ma'uriv by koil havar. And everybody has the ability to discern, is he hearing the koil of the shofar alone, or is he also hearing the koil of the echo? Now, if you notice, the Mishnah Berurah says over here that he gives you two factors. One is the depth of the bar, and the other one is the richok hamokoim, the distance from the Baal Tekeah. And I want to point you now to the Biur Halacha, Dibur HaMaschil v'im koil havara shamu lo yotzu, which it begins on Samach Aleph Amud Beis. It's a very lengthy Mishnah Berurah, and we're certainly not going to do the whole thing, but I want to read at least a piece of it to give us a little bit of a better understanding of what the Achronim say about this koil havara. Ayin b'Mishnah Berurah, he says, take a look at the Mishnah Berurah, he's cut in Zion, shedara zeh talui, that this problem of the koil havara is dependent on two factors. Shedara zeh talui lefi omek habar, it's a problem that has its root in the depth of the bar, v'hisrachakoi mimenu, and the distance away. Because of the Taz writes, the Taz looks at this halacha of the problem of the koil havara, and he says if that's a problem, if the koil havara is a problem, then you could have a problem of koil havara even by a regular Beis HaKnesses, not a bar or a ma'ara, nothing underground, a regular shul. Afilu b'tekeh bebeis HaKnesses. V'yesh oimdem bachutz k'tzas rochuk mimenu, and there are some people standing outside far away. Now the truth is, we dealt with this last year on Rosh Hashanah. I did not. I was in quarantine last year, Rosh Hashanah. I blew shofar for myself. But there were many people who didn't want to come to shul to hear shofar. They couldn't come to shul because of the risk. So there was a place where they blew shofar inside, and people were standing outside socially distant, and they were listening to shofar outside. So here we have a Taz. The Taz says, "Afilu b'tekeh bebeis haknesses," even if you blow shofar in the shul, v'yesh oimdem bachutz k'tzas rachuk mimenu, and there are some people that are standing outside the shul, but at a distance from the shul, yesh bazeh gam kein shaychus havchana. Over here also, the halacha that we're learning applies to this too, and you need havchana, you need to be able to discern lefi arichuk mi beis hakneses, depending on how far you are from the beis hakneses, you have to be able to discern, did you hear the kol shofar or did you hear the kol havara? Now, what does the Taz mean by this? What does the Taz mean that depending on how far you are from the shul, you have to discern, did you hear a kol havara or a kol shofar? What kol havara? Until now, we've been explaining kol havara, that kol havara is an echo. And the problem is that you have two kolos that are me'uriv together. We have two kolos being mixed. We have the kol shofar, and we have the kol of the echo. The kol shofar is kosher, the kol of the echo is pasul. So you have a kol kosher and a kol pasul that are me'uriv together. That's the way we understood the problem. The Taz is seeing a different problem. If you skip down now, in my Mishnah, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. By me, it's in the middle of the line. I think in your prints, it's going to be a little bit different. The Berurah says, V'nira me'ataz. The Chavetz Chaim says, it's apparent from the words of the Taz, the mefarish kol havara, that he's explaining this concept of kol havara, not as an echo, but rather as kol cholush, a weakened kol. The kol hanishma michutz labinyan, a sound that you're hearing from outside of the building, umerachik, and certainly if it's far away, einoi kol kach chazak, kamay kol shenishma mikarav mibifnim. It's not as powerful as the sound that you hear inside with the Baal Tekeah. The Taz is learning that kol havara is a kol cholush. It's a weakened kol. Not just that it's a kol me'uriv. It's a weakened kol. It's not a clear kol. And therefore, says the Taz, if you're standing far away from the Beis HaKnesses, you have to understand what it is that you're hearing. Now, I'm wondering, is this based on is it a problem of decibels? So there's a certain shear, so and so many decibels you're yotza, and so many decibels you're not yotza? I'm tempted to say that the Taz is really coming off of the same understanding as everybody else as kol havara, with a little bit of a knetch. And I'm saying this based, I didn't research this heavily, but just from what I'm seeing so far, my feeling is that what the Taz might be saying over here is that what is the problem of the kol havara? The problem is v'ha'avarta shofar. You have to hear a clear blast, a clear hachraza of the shofar. So if you're inside the room with the Baal Tekeah, you hear the blast of the shofar very clearly. If the Baal Tekeah blows while he's standing inside a pit, then we know that there's going to be kol shofar and kol havara. And if you're standing outside, you're not getting the direct blast of the shofar. So what's going to reach your ear is going to be a blend of the kol shofar and the kol havara. That's a problem. You didn't hear the kol shofar straight. Now the Taz stretches it to something else. And that is, if you're standing outside the Beis HaKnesses, but you're berichuk makayim, you're standing far away, it's not just a problem that the decibels are going to be low and the volume is going to be low. I think there's another problem as well, which is that now you're hearing a lot of noise. You're hearing ambient noise together with the sound of the shofar. And some of that ambient noise may blend in with the sound of the shofar. Now you'll tell me that in shul there's also ambient noise. You have kids making noise. The sound of the kid who's kvetching, or the baby who's crying in Yezres Noshim, that is very clearly different from the sound of the shofar. That's not called that you're hearing two kolos that are me'urbiv, that are mixed together. No, that's a baby crying, that's the shofar. I heard the shofar very clearly. Yes, it's true, I also heard a baby crying. But now I want you to imagine that you're standing outside 200 feet away from the shul, and somebody's blowing shofar. You're hearing all sorts of ambient noise. You're hearing traffic noise. You might be hearing the wind rustling through the trees. There's all sorts of ambient noise outside. Some of that ambient noise mixes together with the sound of the shofar, especially since, outside 200, 300, 400, 500 feet away, the sound of the shofar is not so loud. So now, is that called that you heard the sound of the shofar clearly? Or is that called a koil me'urav? Now you heard the shofar mixed together with a koil havara, mixed together with other ambient noise. Okay, I'm going through all this because I'm trying to give a little bit better of an understanding of what are we dealing with over here with koil havara. So now let's go back to the Mishnah Berurah. So the Mishnah Berurah said, "V'kasra al-paiskim desibas tarazet tali ba'omek abar oy bericha kamakad v'chol adam yesh b'yadai lahavchin ulahakir." And everybody has the ability to discern and to recognize im kol shofar shama bilachud, if they heard the sound of the shofar alone, oy me'urav by koil havara, or if there's a koil havara mixed in with it. Says the Chavetz Chaim, v'yesh oimrim oid, there are those who say even further, da'afilu atokea bebeis hakneses, this is the Taz, da'afilu tatokea bebeis hakneses, even if the Baal Tekea is blowing in shul, v'yesh oim the bachutz k'tzas rachak bimenu, but there are some people who are standing outside a little bit far, a little bit distant from the shul. Shaykh bazeh gam kein avchana lefi arichuk mi beis hakneses v'ayin bir halacha ma shekasavnu bazeh. That's the Taz. Now, the Chavetz Chaim is not happy with the Taz, and he goes through this whole lengthy bir halacha where he gives different reasons why he's not happy with the Taz. But at the end, he does say, let me see if I can find it quickly. Yeah, it's by me. It's on the bottom of Samach Aleph Amud Beis. Umikam Makom Lamaisa Ein Lozuz Midivrei Ataz. Lahalacha Lamaisa. You can't neglect what the Taz says. Yep. V'yesh Misha Machmir. The Chavetz Chaim says weiter in the Mishnah Berurah. There are those that are Machmir v'Omer, and they say De la'oimde mi b'chotz tamid nishma koil havara. The Mechaber ruled over here that for those that are standing outside the bar of the Ma'ara, the Mechaber said, it depends. If they can tell, if they can discern that they heard the Koil Shofar alone and clearly, then they're Yoitza. But if they feel that they heard the Koil Havara, they're not Yoitza. Says the Chavetz Chaim, there are those that are Machmer, he's bringing this from the Rush, that are more Machmer than this Mechaber. V'yesh misha machmir ma'va'omer. There are those who are machmir and say that for those standing outside, tabit nishma koil havara. There's no discerning if you heard the koil shofar or the koil havara. No, if you're outside, that's called you heard the koil havara and you're not yotza. And the Chavetz Chaim says v'yesh lachush l'deyazu shaloi b'shas adchak. We should be concerned for this shita, the shita of the Rush, unless we're dealing with the shas adchak. V'leskaya oidapam. And you should hear shofar over again, avabli bracha, without a bracha, ad she'yabar lo shakal havara shama, unless you're certain that you had a problem and you weren't yotza because you heard the koil havara. Now let's go to the top line of Samach Beis Amud Aleph. Let's just finish this sif. The same halacha would apply to somebody who blew shofar inside a large barrel. So the Baal Tekea took the shofar and his head, and he stuck his head into a barrel, and he blew shofar in the barrel. Im kol shofar shama, if somebody's standing outside, nobody's standing in the barrel, if somebody's standing outside and he heard the koil of the shofar, he feels that very clearly he heard the blast of the shofar alone, yotza, he's yotza. But v'im kol havara shama, but if he feels that he heard the sound of the shofar mixed with the sound of the echo, la yotza, then he's not yotza. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Ches, over here, the Mechaber did not say, if somebody blows shofar in a barrel, the ones who are standing in the barrel are yotza. The ones who are standing outside the barrel, it depends if they heard the kol shofar or the kol havara. The Mechaber didn't say that, like he said in the context of a pit. Why? Because people don't stand inside a barrel. The way people will stand in a ditch or in a pit. V'rak machdis ha-shofar l'sham. By a barrel, somebody sticks his head in, v'tekeya, and he blows in the barrel. V'hu oimen b'bachutz. And even the Baal Tekeya is really standing outside the barrel. However, there are those that say that there's a different reason why the Mechaber wrote the halacha differently by a barrel than he did by a pit. Because by a barrel, the echo of the barrel is much more pronounced than the echo of a ditch or a pit, because the sound chamber is much more confined. A barrel is much smaller. And in that case, even somebody who would be in the barrel, after sheshemeh kalavara. Normally we say, if you're standing in the cave or in the ditch or pit together with the Baal Tekeya, we're not concerned that you heard a kalavara. We're convinced that because you're standing there together with the Baal Tekeya, that you're going to hear the blast of the shofar alone very clearly. But by a confined barrel, we're not convinced. And therefore, by a barrel, you should rule stringently, and you should blow shofar over again without a bracha, unless it's very clear to you that you heard the kail shofar alone very, very clearly. Okay, thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. Achenu kol beis Yisrael la'imdim batzaro ba'ashivya ha'imdim bein bayam u'bein b'yabasha ha'makim rachim aleim v'yitziam mitzara l'rvacha me'afela l'oira mishiba l'geula hashta b'agalo zman kariv. On a personal note, my children, my oldest married couple, moved to Eretz Yisrael today. They made Aliyah. They're headed to Afula. It's our hope that they should be, have an Aliyah and tremendous Hatzlacha, and we should be mispal for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, especially in Eretz Yisrael, in the difficult times that they're going through. And the schus of limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. We should all be mechazik in limud HaTorah. We should be mechazik in limud HaTorah and ma'asim tovim, and befrat in limud HaTorah. We should be machzik in limud HaTorah. Be well.